Okay. Robin Grille is a Sydney-based psychologist and parenting educator. And he and I were chatting earlier. He says, Kate, well, you can talk about whatever you want for my introduction. And, we have done an awful lot. Robin came here. I don't know how many years ago was that, Robin? You came and did a talk.
2007. 2007 was my first time in LA.
Yeah, and we went to visit Joseph Chilton Pierce, and we did all kinds of things while you were here.
Yeah. That was 2013. That was fantastic.
Yeah, we were just getting started with the APA program that I ran for 6 years, and we did this wonderful recording that still stands in the classroom on the rights of the 5 rites of passage, or the 5 rights, actually, of the early childhood, which you've expanded into the developmental needs, which I'm sure you're going to talk about a little bit tonight. But so Robin's first book, Parenting for a Peaceful World, received international acclaim and led to speaking engagements around Australia, USA, the UK, Canada, Indonesia, New Zealand, and Hong Kong. And his second book, Heart to Heart Parenting, is also available in German and Korean. Robin's work is animated by his belief that humanity's future is largely dependent on the way we collectively relate to our children. Inner Child Journeys, How Our Children Grow Us Up is his newest title. So we're very happy to have this training for practitioners in the online school. And Robin is a fabulous lecturer, and this is, I think, his 3rd or 4th free lecture, just to really get his message out into the world. So thank you, Robin. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Kate, so much. And big welcome to all of you. I've really been looking forward to this moment, because this is a presentation that has been kind of simmering inside me for a very long time. So I'm so pleased for the opportunity to be able to laser it all into one conversation with you guys. And I wish I could see you all, but my screen isn't large enough. But it is lovely to see as many of you as my Macintosh will show me. So let's begin with just a few moments of settling and arriving. Okay, and in particular arriving to why personally each and every one of you are here today. What has brought you here? So I'd like us all to take a moment to retire our attention inwardly. Let's come to our bodies. If you like, allow your eyelids to be gently closed. Bring your attention inside. Feel the feet. Feel the sensation of the ground against your feet. And as your body wants to take its next in-breath in its own time, breathe in through the soles of your feet. Feel that energy coming up your legs, through your hips, into your belly and chest. A little bit deeper. And then feeling the back of your chair supporting your back. Just lean into that and with a sigh. Arriving inward, intimate with self. And now, look around inside at what you have brought with you today. It might be a whole pile of things, like boxes in a room, questions, yearnings. This is an opportunity for you to articulate to yourself why you're here. What are you wanting from this presentation? What is your question? Or questions, plural. Perhaps it's just an open curiosity. Let's see what happens. That's okay. Let it be that. Or there could be some very important particular questions that you bring. Questions or needs, strong feelings, things you want to share, whatever your truth is. But find what that is for you. Take a moment. And the things that have brought you here today will be your orientation. So let's take another breath in. And as you breathe out, gently allowing the eyes to be slowly open. And really gently take in the space around yourself. A new hello to the day that surrounds you, or the evening that surrounds you. And in your own pace, come back to the us, to the group. Thank you. And I do thank you very much for being here and for sharing this moment. I've been very much looking forward. The reason why I wanted to do this presentation and to organize my thoughts around it, it's many things that I've been feeling for a long time. And in one way, it's a kind of a protest. There's because I feel like our experience in our pre-verbal time of life, which, you know, you believe whatever you believe in terms of where that begins for you. We all have perhaps a different idea of that, but there's definitely pre-verbal consciousness. And I often feel like that is treated culturally like a poor cousin of the verbal, the childhood memories that we all carry, the deep impact that those childhood experiences have. And in one way, the acceptable memory is the one that can be narrated, the one that we have a story to show for. And so, on the one hand, I've been very thrilled to see how much our modern cultures have moved forward in terms of accepting and really embracing how deeply important childhood experience is. We didn't used to do that in the modern, so-called modern world. People were very, very dismissive and contemptuous even about the value of childhood experience. That's changing rapidly, and it's been progressing well, and we now have, as part of our daily language, trauma-aware this, trauma-aware that, trauma-aware therapy. There are trauma-aware dentists, and I love that that's happened. In the world of medicine as well, you know, increasingly, even though we haven't come anywhere near far enough, I realize that, but you could, for instance, go to a dentist and say, look, I'm terrified and I have had some traumas. There's been some violence, there's been, you know, medical trauma, or there's been some abuse, or, you know, whatever. I don't need to go into the story, but you name your story, and somebody is increasingly likely to respond by saying, oh my goodness, I really get it. There'll be no judgment, and you feel a little bit more held, and that the way that they approach you is more sensitized. That style of relating is growing so quickly, though not quickly enough, of course. But in so many of the, let's call it the trauma-aware community, right, for lack of a better term, I find that the conversation almost always hovers around a story that can be told. So that if you feel, I'm going to use the word crazy, okay? And please know, I'm not using the word, I'm using it deliberately for its colloquial sense, okay? I'm not diagnosing anyone. But we say that unthinkingly, oh, you're crazy. Gosh, I'm crazy. I'm feeling so crazy today. Let's go for that. Let's use that term along those lines today, deliberately. You know, you can be a little crazy, but if your people understand, oh, look, I've got this story behind me. I'm a war veteran. Now that's acceptable to be a little crazy if you've been a war veteran. It didn't used to be before Vietnam. It is now. Or if there's been abuse in your life that you can represent in a story, or if there's been, you know, terrible neglect or abandonment or other kinds of trauma or deaths, etc., then you're more likely to feel understood. And people will say, oh, he's acting crazy right now. She's acting crazy right now. I'm more angry than usual, or I'm feeling aloof or stuck or dissociated, whatever it is. And more likely people say, oh, I get it. That's fine. We don't judge you for that, right? That's happening more and more. I'm really noticing it culturally, that people feel so much more free to talk about this stuff openly. And my goodness, in the most unlikely places, you could be in a bathroom in an airport, and there'll be a poster saying, if you're feeling depressed, talk to someone about it. I mean, what a wonderful revolution that is. What a great relief. People are openly talking about their pain. What's being left out that troubles me deeply is, what about when you don't have a story to tell? Because you don't have narrative memory about it. Does that matter less? You know, the entire course of our lives, arguably at a time when we are more helpless, more open, more vulnerable, and less able to escape pain than at any other time of the human lifespan. So that as babies, unborn, newly born, or young babies, up until language comes in, through that time, we're exquisitely sentient and utterly dependent, so that little things matter infinitely more. There are no molehills, there are mountains. And what has come to feel like a grave injustice to me that I'm concerned about is that when there's ignorance about the value of a painful experience, and by value I mean the long-term impact, that leaves the door wide open to every kind of judgment, every kind of projection, every kind of put down. And I hear that almost incessantly in our world. Particularly in recent decades, that we've become, I think, almost globally, a so much more psychologically aware world. There's so many people, maybe most people, that we hold the language of personal growth and healing. Okay, that wasn't there in the 1970s when I was in high school. Or maybe it was beginning to be if you went to Esalen in California or something, but not much more than that. So, in the personal growth world, and now kind of there's spiritual practices that have mashed with that as well. A lot of Buddhism involved, and so there's always these injunctions that I hear. that when you feel emotionally kind of out of control, when you feel crazy, invariably someone comes in to say, let go of attachment. You're crazy because you're too attached. Or there's always someone saying, get over it, or some version of get over it. Let go of the past. I'm not entirely surprised that we do that with one another so much. There's so much shaming that goes on about our reactivity, enormous amounts of social shaming that goes on, and a kind of a self-righteousness about Jesus. Are you still acting that way? That happened when you were little. Get over it. Or why are you so anxious? Why are you worry too much? Here's another one, like a massive empathy blocker. Don't worry. You can't change anything by worrying. So why worry? Have you heard that stated? Do you ever say that to people? As if we have control over those emotions that come up, as if there's just a light switch and that you have volitional control. It's profoundly shaming and alienating. So the myriad expectations that we have on getting over it. I was going to say why I'm not surprised that we judge each other so much and we push each other around and manipulate each other so much with get up, get over it, get through it, is that it's difficult to be around each other's anxiety. It's difficult to be around each other's anger. It is. We tend to, why is it difficult? Not because of the other person, because then we get triggered into our own. And then we expect the other person to be calm so that we can be calm. We fall into the trap frequently of trying to regulate our own calm, our own inner wellness, by regulating the mood of the other person, rather than taking responsibility for how porous we are to other people's feelings. I call it OPA. OPA, other people's anxiety. When we lose a boundary so we can love the other person where they are, then we get drawn across into their current, and there's a tendency to blame the other person for it. And we say, stop being so crazy. So, I would really like to see the trauma-aware world really include the conversation about what about those moments of life that were painful. Because the beautiful, loving moments don't make us crazy, but the painful ones do. For a long time, for decades, for the rest of our lives, until healing comes along. Let's include that a lot in the conversation. There's, trauma, if you want to use that word, trauma that happened that I can remember because I was 11 years old. There's traumas that happened that my body remembers, but that I can't necessarily retain an audio-visual film of that. And what that's going to bring is an enormity of forgiveness and compassion. I want to say that no one, beginning with you and me, none of us are ever crazy without a reason, ever. It's not just genetic. It's it tells a story. Our craziness is biographical. It's always biographical. This doesn't mean, here's what I'm not saying. This doesn't mean not having a boundary. Our craziness makes us difficult for people around us. They need to say, wow, hey, stop yelling at me. I don't deserve that. Stop. We need to have boundaries with each other. It doesn't mean accepting toxic behavior at all. I just want to make that clear. What it does mean is not coming from a self-righteous, judgmental place, which I fall into that trap all of the time. I hear that voice in me all of the time. It comes out most when I'm listening to politicians speak, and I lose all compassion in that moment because I feel powerless. That's why. So I think it's high time that we included this so much more in the conversation. And I know that the prenatal, perinatal community has been at this, you guys are very well versed in this already, but I'd like to give it some more shape. I have a sense that there's an automatic self and an intentional self that we all carry. The intentional self is when there's actually, when we make a choice in the moment about, look, I'm feeling my reactivity, and that's a part of me. It's never all of me, it's a part of me. And there's another part of me that wants a different way forward right now in the way that I communicate. And that's our intentional self. The automatic self, and I believe that our instant reactions are our automatic self. We're in that probably for most of the day, I think. What do you think about that? Our automatic self is defensive. It mightn't sound and or look nice, but it's defensive. And that's been conditioned. Those neuropsychological defenses were what kept us alive and well through profound challenges. You can tell when you've really understood where your defenses come from, because in that moment, you'll be grateful for your craziness. Even though it doesn't work for you in the present day, it has saved you, saved your life perhaps. You'll be filled with wonder at the intelligence of the body, your body, at producing these defenses. And that's the general statement. I want to go into the particular. Actually, before I do, what's really empowering in these times is that everything I've been talking about, a lot of psychotherapists, many schools of psychotherapy have been talking about for many decades. Although much of the world didn't want to listen to that. And in particular in the somatic, the body-oriented psychotherapies. What's interesting today is that there's a bunch of pretty hard sciences, as hard as science can get, that have come to confirm what psychotherapists were suspecting, but even strengthen it. So that, you look at studies, for instance, when people ask, I'll go back a little bit, when people ask, because I still hear a lot of cynicism in the community, a lot of cynicism. And I think it's very defensive. People really poo-poo, some people still really poo-poo the idea that, what happened to me as a baby still has an impact now. But science has understood that 100%. There are so many studies. Epigenetics is one of the pathways that early childhood re-switches our genes so that it reconditions our stress response, potentially for the rest of our lives. There was one interesting study, a very telling study, where they looked at mothers that were present and survived the attacks on the Two Towers and 9/11, who were pregnant at the time and close to the events, if not inside the building. And they looked at the cortisol levels of their children 3 years later, and they were reset to an abnormally high level. They found that was particularly true if the mothers were in the 3rd trimester, less so if the mothers were in the 2nd trimester of pregnancy. So you can see where powerful moments that are filled with terror Even before we were born, they reset our stress response. And then people say, oh my God, everyone I know everyone's had some stuff happen in their childhood. It was scary. Gosh, get over it. And we're all happy. Look at us now. I'm perfectly happy. You're happy. We're happy. What the hell does that matter? What needs to be understood is it doesn't stop you necessarily from feeling great moments of happiness. A baby can be very traumatized by being left alone to cry all night. It happened to me as a baby. It happened to a lot of us in my generation, most of us, I think. Super traumatizing. But when you wake up in the morning, you're still smiling at your mum and you're still a gorgeous baby. And people say, see, nothing happened. It's dangerous to have such a lack of understanding. What changes isn't, you'll still grow up and be a nice person. What changes is your stress response. That gets reset. So that on a good day, you're gorgeous, you're wonderful, you're brave. But the way that you react to life's challenges is being reset epigenetically. Not only epigenetically, neuropsychologically. So that you know about this, the neural pathways are changed. And there's an evolutionary purpose to that. Endocrinological as well. Our biochemical response to stress gets altered. Our gut response to stress, our gut biology, microbiology, the brain chemicals that are made in the enteric brain and the intestine and in the heart, those levels are reset for life. And there's a very intelligent evolutionary purpose in that as babies, our bodies are taking notes from the environment and saying, this is the world that I need to prepare for. Psychological defenses only work when you cannot control them. You don't decide to have a bad temper. You don't decide to worry a lot, worry too much. You don't decide to have an anxiety reaction or a panic attack. You don't decide to be, say, aloof or over-intellectualizing. That doesn't get decided. It's conditioned deeply into our neurology, our guts, our epigenetics. The reason why this isn't a trap is that in understanding the architecture of how this happens, then and only then can we mobilize and find some beautiful ways forward. Okay, I want to share a screen. Let me see if I can do that, because there's one slide that I want to provide you with, and you're perfectly welcome to take a photo with your phone so that you can then revise it afterwards. I don't expect you to buy everything I'm saying word for word, please, but totally digest as you need to. These are my beliefs, but play with it. And I think you'll find this helpful. Let me see if I can find. Now, how do I find my desktop? I might need your help here. Here we go. There it is. See if you can see this. I'll read it out to you. Preverbal experience permanently changes neural connections, neurochemistry, and gene expression in ways that condition triggered behaviors for life or until healing happens. Psychological defensive patterns, in other words, the automatic self, are not arrived at by decision. As babies, we don't say, oh, look, people are being very, hostile and angry and they fight a lot around me. I'm going to be dissociated. We don't have that level of self-conscious awareness, and it's not a deliberate decision. That faculty hasn't even arrived until quite a bit later. It's this automatic thing that our bodies, the whole neurology, the psychoneuroendocrinology of us is recalibrated automatically, like a plant that will grow towards where the sun is. So there is no choice involved. That's important to understand because it disables our willingness to be judgmental of one another. You know, these automatic responses are beyond choice. Choice comes later, but choice isn't a switch. Choice is a healing pathway that involves meeting our deepest emotional needs, which create the conditions for growth to happen. So it's not just like, oh, I'm going to stop worrying tomorrow. That means you're fighting against yourself. We fight against our own craziness. That just makes our craziness worse. So the automatic self is conditioned into our neuroendocrinological and immunological stress responses by repeated emotionally overwhelming experiences. How do I close screen sharing now? Stop share. Okay. I'm sorry. Was I too quick? Did you all get to take a photo of that? Anyone need that on longer? Okay, we're all good. Now, I was going to say something. It's okay. It's gone. So that's in the general sense. I really wanted to set the scene for why, as a community, as a culture, globally, it's really, really time that everybody is talking about this. And it will remove so much of the cruelty, the shaming, the judgment, and start bringing some care to those parts of ourselves that seem crazy. So let's look at, we're looking, in terms of the pre-verbal stage of our lives, we're looking at the first, from the training that I had in somatic psychotherapy, the first three, kind of 2 or 3 stages. It's not so clearly defined, but it's about, it's 2 stages, both pre-verbal. The prenatal, perinatal, which is about the human right to exist. That's what's being played out emotionally. And then they used to call it the oral stage in psychoanalysis. So the baby stage, the attachment stage, the stage in which attachment is absolutely everything. I want to take a moment to say, this isn't, of course, the only time of life that's impactful. There are later stages. It's not the only time of life that's important and meaningful. It's just the one that keeps on being left out of the conversation because we don't consciously remember. But we need to get this, what we don't consciously remember, narrative memory is separate to body memory. The scientists call it implicit memory. We still have reactions to one another that spring from body memory all the way back to our baby experiences. So leading up to birth, through birth, the perinatal moments of life, fight or flight is not available in the neurology. All that our organism has available is dissociation. Dissociation, where you unfeel. It's mediated with natural opioids. It's like taking heroin, but the brain mercifully produces opioids that when fear or unmet need or pain are overwhelming, rather than die or break apart in some other way, there's a anesthesia that happens. How merciful and brilliant is that? If that happens powerfully enough or often enough, the brain learns that, becomes habituated to that. The neural pathways condition us to that. So we remain more dissociative for life. And then that works. See, a lot of what our psychological defenses are, people call that personality. These characterological things that we seem to do a lot, that people immediately associate that with us. Most of what people call personality is psychological defenses. It's the story of what we have survived. Moments of profound terror or abandonment, being left alone in a crib in the hospital. Birth trauma, being left alone to cry through the night. So dissociation, freezing. The other defense is when, as we start moving into volition, being able to direct body movements as babies, reaching out with our hands and with our heads, with our lips. When that reaching out is chronically unmet, particularly in the very recent past, where the medical world was saying, don't ever feed a baby when they're asking, feed according to a schedule. So babies, human babies were living in a chronic state of denial and abandonment, going into absolute despair. So the human body is not able to tolerate that past a certain point. The body learns how to collapse the reaching out response. It's just too painful to reach out into nothingness. So we survive by learning to go, ah. Now that becomes habituated into the brain. How many of us simply forget to reach out to each other when we're in need? Or that we reject others when they reach out to us because it's intolerable to have someone ask us when we didn't get. So dissociation, freezing, collapse. The other very, very common defense, particularly as we move into the more active baby phase, is holding on. All the behaviors that are to do with clinging, whining, fussing, clinging, anxious clinging, that can become written into the system. Particularly if it's worked, when mum's not coming, if I'm anxiously clinging long enough, if my body persists in that, not because I decide to, but because that's a reflex, I can't help it. And that starts to work, I get picked up, even if I get picked up resentfully, but I get picked up as a baby. That response cements that into my neural pathways. There's a long explanation. Hebb's axiom. You've heard this one: neurons that fire together wire together. If that happens often enough, whinging, whining, clinging, holding on, eventually gets me my need met. That's it. That's me for life. And our defenses, I'll repeat this, are three things: unconscious, spontaneous, and automatic. So we do the things that are self-defensive before we realize. That's the only way that it could have saved your life. If you had to decide your psychological defense, I think I'll collapse now, or I think I'll scream now. If you had to decide that, it wouldn't have worked. It needs to be set to automatic so that you no longer have permission. That's why we seem crazy and then we judge each other. Think of all the things that you feel as if you can't help doing it: being cranky, being irritable, worrying too much, becoming detached. Sliding back a little bit to trauma, Trauma to our parents, trauma to our mother when we were inside the womb, trauma to us inside the womb, birth trauma, perinatal trauma. And it tends to, our only defense is about dissociation. The kinds of characterological or behaviors that we see in adults that are remnants of that unspoken past, things like emotional remoteness, aloofness, emotional detachedness, unfeeling. It's like the head split off from the body. Those people get criticized, they get attacked. That's a big part of me, by the way. But it's a survival response. We can work with it, but you need to respect it first. Dreaminess, very otherworldly people up in the clouds a lot of the time, ungrounded. Now you're starting to understand, right? I won't have to repeat it. You get the gist. What horrific thing ungrounded that person, ripped them off of the ground? That's what we should be asking. Intellectualization, over-analysis, overthinking, over-intellectualization, reducing things to the rational, pushing everything to the frontal lobes, denial of the river of emotionality, which is it can't be measured in a test tube. I mean, entire careers are built out of that when you think about it. That's a schizoid response. It's from the schizoid family of defenses. It can come from trauma later in life. Often it's very, very characteristic of pre-verbal and very, very early pre-verbal, like around earliest babyhood, when dissociation was the only thing available. Drug addiction, okay, oral drugs, tobacco smoking, alcohol, like that sense of, oh my God, I got to stuff things in my mouth. Food addiction, that oral despair, massively, I'm not saying this is the only reason for it, but massively to do with early weaning. And we have most of human civilization is weaned a lot earlier than what the human organism needs, much earlier. If we get breastfed at all, or we get breastfed without the mother's pleasure because she's been traumatized around this. So I've seen little kids that I've seen 1-year-olds, 2-year-olds, they just the despair, because the power of the oral need in the jaw, in the mouth, in the tongue, in the throat is so immense. Nature put that in there. It's a supreme power. It's for our survival and connection. We connect through the mouth when we're babies. That's why they used to call it the oral stage. So when we aren't met there, I've seen kids just desperately try to get their entire fist in their mouth. And that really showed me like a photograph of how powerful is the despair to be met orally. That remains in there. It's unfulfilled, unsatisfied. We shove cigarettes into that, alcohol, food. And then when we do that, we do so unconsciously, so that we don't know how to feel that deep, delicious fulfillment from just taking a bite out of a carrot. The human potential in the neurological is for just a bite out of a carrot to be, to give us streams of pleasure throughout our body. Tingling pleasure. Deliciousness is our birthright. No wonder we don't get satisfied. We don't taste what we put in our mouths, but there's a story behind that. So the addictions, and for very early trauma, particularly the hallucinogenic addictions, right? Tripping. I don't want to be here. I can't bear to be here. I wasn't wanted to be here. Or when I arrived, there was violence, there was shock. This isn't like a destiny that I'm talking about. It doesn't always happen. It's amazing to me how surprisingly varied this is amongst people. But there are these themes that repeat a lot. And contemplating all of this is important to me because it automatically brings a sense of spontaneous forgiveness. The no wonder experience. No wonder. Geez, I don't like you. You're acting crazy. But if I actually appreciate in my gut what you've been through, what you are a veteran of, in the same way that I don't judge a war veteran for getting jumpy when the car backfires or someone slams the door, I don't want to judge you when you act weird for something that you can't even tell me a story about. Think about how much more trapped we are inside our preverbal pain, because you know that being able to tell your story, when you name it, you can tame it. You know that. To talk to a caring, empathic witness starts to relieve the pressure. It's difficult to talk about, this is what I heard happen to me as a baby, but I'm not sure, but I feel it in my body, right? But we can make it easier to talk about that by being respectful listeners of ourselves and of each other and creating the kinds of communities that do that. So very, very quickly, the other group of defenses around the oral stage is the compensated defenses. This happens more amongst people that some people got some of the attachment and kept on losing it or lost it too early. Some people didn't get it at all. Those that didn't get it at all, part of the survival defense is to overcompensate into self-reliance. And this might be part of you, or a lot of people in your life that are sort of kind of crazy self-reliant. Oh no, I can do that by myself. Don't help me. It irritates me. And people go to wild ends to just, no, I don't need anyone. I'm an island. It happens so much. Okay. Dependency phobia. It has a name. Oh, well, it doesn't have a name. I made that up. But I like to call it dependency phobia because it erases judgment. It brings respect. I'm going to stop talking because I'd love to hear, with the little time that we have left, two things I want to do. Kate, please keep me on track. I want to hear some questions. And also at the end, I want to let you know about there's still spaces left in our courses, Inner Child Journeys, training for practitioners, coming up very soon, which deals all of this, but it actually would talk about like a wonderful healing journey that we can take once we identify the inner baby that's crying. We'd also talk about the later stages, inner adolescent, inner toddler, all of that. The wonderful things, the beautiful things that happen just by acknowledging that that's the need inside that was unmet at the beginning. There's an adult version of how do I meet that need today. It doesn't take all that much. And then there's this flowering that happens in our hearts where we can move forward from the automatic self to the intentional self, connecting with the world around us much more deeply, connecting with ourselves more deeply. That's basically the process, the journey of the inner child work that I teach based on my book. Coming up, maybe Kate, you can tell everyone about it at the end before we go. But for now, let's take a few questions. Burning questions. Who's got them?
So if you have a question, you can just open your microphone and I'll bring you up on with Robin. Hi, Harris.
Do this.
Sorry, I'm sitting outside, so it's hard to see me. But great talk, Robin, and much appreciated all the concepts. One question, and this has been my own journey, and then you mentioned, okay, here's understanding, appreciating, I'm a veteran of whatever, and here's how I'm acting it out. Can the inner child call forth acting out from others. In other words, why am I always attracted to angry women? Or somehow, why do I find angry women showing up in my space?
Yeah, Harrison,
And
absolutely, Harrison. Yeah,
yeah, go ahead.
you've named basically what happens in relationships, because my crazy stuff triggers your crazy stuff, according to, actually even my non-crazy stuff might trigger your crazy stuff, according to what you're defending from in your own life, where you've been wounded. So that's the basis of those intractable relationship conflicts that go on all of the time. But the beauty is that when we unpack that, we see each other so much more deeply, that it's even because of the conflict that just erupted between us. If we then know how to step into inner child aware dialogue along the lines of, wow, when you yelled, I felt like a 5-year-old terrified because my dad was yelling at me and I wanted to push you away, or hey, when you were feeling anxious and worrying a lot and fretting, I can't stand that because it triggers my own fretting. And when we start taking ownership in recognition of our own wounding, it gives the other person freedom, and it gives us empowerment. And then further, it enables us to feel seen. Because when I'm shadow boxing with you, I'm almost guaranteeing that I won't feel seen by you, because I'm alienating you with my behavior. When we drop that and we just open up about what's going on inside, and half of it's going to be pre-verbal. But we can bring words to that. And so the conflict gives an opportunity to take our relationship to a deeper honeymoon, if you like. And that's very, very special. But, it goes back to your question, Harrison, that's actually what you stated is what's happening. And you can open up any Facebook page at any time of day at random. You're going to see people getting triggered by each other nonstop.
Yeah.
Trigger meets trigger.
Well, my question
thanks. Yeah.
Well, just one, what about the situations where you feel the person is just too committed to the hostility and I need to work on my own self, but that would preclude me falling into creating these patterns? Is that, do you see that? When you can't really, you don't see space from the other person for an adult conversation.
Sure. Of course. Yeah, we don't always have a partner who's willing to step into that inner child aware conversation with us, or take any personal responsibility at all. There's always somebody around that just wants to be hostile or rejecting or something, reactive with you, and who feels in their own world, in their own vision, their own paradigm, for whom absolutely you're the bad guy. Inside this box, you absolutely are. And of course, you're going to be with people sometimes where that's not going to shift from the other side. All kinds of things happen. Sometimes when you come to your vulnerability, it can be surprising how the other person will drop their attack. But sometimes even then that doesn't happen. You need a boundary. None of this work means that you don't have a right to strong boundaries. Sometimes you need to push back or walk away. You've got to preserve yourself. But what this does take away is our need to, it's like I can push you away without the sense that of hatred or disgust or contempt in who you are. And very briefly, I remember back in the day of George W. Bush, and I was in absolute despair about what he was doing. And, you know, I'm cool if your politics are different. It's not the problem. For me, I was in despair and I kind of hated the guy. And I thought it'll never get worse than this. We've hit rock bottom. So maybe that's a good thing, isn't it? Never get worse than this. I had a dream about him. This uncalled for dream. I saw him at about 7 or 8 years old, and he was playing dress ups. He was in a cowboy suit and he was swaggering like this, he really wanted to be seen at being the tough guy. And he had a smile and he was like a little boy and he was beautiful. And it, you know, it almost brings tears to my eyes when I think about it. It melted the armoring in my chest about who he is. From that moment on, I hated what he was doing, but I found it impossible to hate him. Physically impossible. I could not conjure that feeling. If I was an American, I'd vote him out 1,000,000 times over, but I can't hate him. I feel a lot of affection towards him. And I don't like trying to forgive anyone. I think conjuring forgiveness is a waste of time. It just annoys me because I want to be curious about what I'm feeling, not trying to change it. But when forgiveness comes like a reflex, spontaneously, I trust it. You know, and it came from a process. I wasn't trying to drive the outcome. It came from a process, a natural organic process. So, okay, I hope that answers your question. But yeah, someone just won't let go of the hostility. Man, get out of there.
Thank you, Harrison.
Right? Yeah. Thanks, Harrison.
Yeah. Sally, do you have a question?
Yes. So whenever I'm working on myself, it consistently goes to having been raped by my pedophile father. Every couple of months, starting when I was about 8. Yeah. And I've done work on birth stuff, but that never comes up. It's any comments?
Yes, thank you, Sally, for and that's it's shocking what you're telling me. I feel shocked, and I'm sorry, so sorry that happened to you. I never decide what people will work on. I would suggest don't try. Well, I don't know, maybe this will work, but I don't tend to say, let's try to work on your baby stuff. I really trust what comes natural, right? Where you feel triggered and what comes up in response to those triggers, go with what your body is asking you to pay attention to. Don't impose a different stage of life because you think you've got homework to do in that area. There's such a wisdom to the body. It doesn't help to, gosh, there was entire generations of people that were saying, right, I'm going to do past life therapy now. Well, how do you know that your body wants that right now? Just go with what naturally comes up. That's what really, really works. And I find that the same thing keeps on coming up again and again and again. It'll keep on coming up forever, 1 trillion times, until things don't come up just to come up. The pain always has a need inside of it that wants recognition and to want some acknowledgement and to be met in some way, whether it's you in conversation with you or with someone in your life, people, situations, with your environment, okay? You with you or you with your outside environment. There's a need. And until that need gets some feeding, some nutrition, the same thing keep on knocking on the door. The inner child is immense, I think limitlessly persistent. The inner child stops knocking at the door when we breathe our last breath. So, and that's so powerful. That's so powerful. We got to admire that. What we carry in our bodies is phenomenal. The resilience and persistence that your inner child is never going to give up. God damn it, I'm going to get what I paid for, or I'm not leaving this restaurant. It's amazing. So, but give the right nutrient, and then there's a release. It might still come up again, but not as frequently, not as often, or that it requires a much bigger trigger for the same stuff to come up again. Oh, here's my inner child again. What do I need? Protection. I need, or whatever. What's the inner? That's the kind of thing we explore in the Inner Child Journeys course.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a bunch of things in, I don't know what your inner child needed to do then, or have. Was it an inside need or a need from someone else? Okay, when that's what it is, then get yourself believed. We need to believe you. We need to believe you, and you need to let that in until you've had enough of that, because you're going to find thousands of people that don't, or they believe you, but they say, look, get over it. You've complained long enough, right? That's the reason why I started this whole gig. There's always somebody that wants you to get over it.
Mm-hmm.
That's the trigger to the, oh shit, I'm going to go right back to my trauma now. I just find that when finally I feel believed, or at least I believe myself to the point that I'm not troubled. If you don't believe me, then that's your problem. Once I can naturally, organically get to that point, it doesn't mean that the old stuff won't come up again, but it comes up less, and other things, different things come up, and there's more peace, there's more pleasure, actually, more pleasure in life and relationships. That's a kind of but you can't expect that. We have to trust what comes up. It's for a reason. See, your craziness, right, is you look where it comes from, and suddenly you can't use the word crazy anymore. It's intelligence. Why wouldn't you be screaming until someone believes you? Goddamn scream for decades until someone goddamn believes me. Enough. One person, no, that was good. I need 3. Right? You will know. Your body will tell you. Your body naturally goes, feels different. But you got to help that process along a little bit.
Yeah.
When you feel the recognition, notice it and breathe it in. That's the role that you play.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sally. So, Kate, what do you think? Do we have room for one last question, or should we finish? Because we promised we'd finish at the hour, or how do we go?
I think go ahead if there's one more. If anyone else would like to. Tamara.
Oh, hi, Robin. Do you have time?
I have, Tamara. I have some intuitive sense that I've met you before.
Do you have time to talk at all about the unpacking process?
Can I out you as my cousin?
Sure.
That's my cousin Tammy. Great to see you.
From the other side of the world.
Yeah, indeed. Go for it. Jump on in.
Oh, so I was asking, do you have time at all to talk a little bit about the unpacking process in the inner journey, how you help people unpack to find this early non-narrative body memory?
Yeah. Okay. Let me see how concisely I can put it. Body awareness is central. So let's say, I'm triggered by you. You've said something and I'm really triggered and I'm mad at you and whatever. And I'll initially just to bring it in. Step 1, bring it in, bring that in. Because my tendency would be to blame you and make it about you. You said blah, blah, and this is why I'm pissed off at you. Okay, fine with that. because that's what we do, that's human, but let's bring it in. What's come up for me? Where was the trigger and what's coming up inside me? So that's taking ownership, step one. Step two is a tracing back. When have I felt this way before I met you? Because it might be partly about you, but partly not about you. So I'll go back to an initial kind of trigger. And sometimes I remember it with narrative memory. Sometimes it's more imagery or a body sense of where I've been, or someone else's story that might confirm it for me. Someone from my family that tells me this happened to you when you were a baby, whatever. But we can piece it. Our body remembers with very surprising clarity. So what was the original experience? This is the important, the really empowering part. Step three is, when that was going on for me, what did I really need? And this requires help, because sometimes people get stuck on that. I don't know what I need, or that's impossible, or how dare I? What did you really need? This developmental need, and your body knows what that is. So we sometimes have to do a lot of supporting for you to trust the wish that comes up. Whether it's realistic or just imaginary, doesn't matter, because it speaks to the need. So we go from the feeling to the need, and then we really honor that. That's a developmental need that was insufficiently met. No wonder you still get triggered. What's a way that you could have that need met today with an appropriate developmental nutrient? Just to say, have more love doesn't cut it, because developmental needs are very specific. Saying I love you won't do. There might be a particular thing, and there's different themes that come up. Might be about holding, might be about boundary, might be the right to self-express, the right to push back, the right to play, things with a sexual theme to it, all kinds of stuff. What was the developmental need? How can I have that is step 4. How can I have that in my life now? Whether it's me just honoring that for me inside, being a good father or a good mother to myself, or whether it's in interaction with the world, with people. It's surprising how much we don't need to go back to being a little kid. There are brilliant, creative, adult appropriate ways to give ourselves that developmental nutrient in the real world, in real time, which it takes one step further than just speaking to ourselves. It's even more potent as an experience. It can feel so liberating and transformative and empowering. And then step 5, when I've at least made that promise to myself, come back to you who triggered me. How do I see you now? Now, when we do that as partners, friends, or couples, we both do that with each other. First, we have the conflict. It's a total mess. Total mess. We walk away from each other, we yell, we throw stuff. It'll happen again. Because our reaction, like I said earlier, defensiveness is automatic, spontaneous, unconscious, right? Afterwards, it's what we do afterwards that changes the world. So if we can both bring that self-revelatory conversation to each other, in which we take ownership. I felt triggered. It's not the fact that you were yelling, it's I felt triggered by your yelling. It's not the fact that you were fretting and worrying, it's that I felt triggered by that. It reminds me of when I was with my mum and she was worrying and fretful and made me feel horribly helpless. And I was angry at her. I wanted her to grow up and be more like an adult, and she couldn't. So I was angry at you now. When we open that up, it goes so much larger than resolving the conflict. It's that we see each other. And you don't have to try to care. Your body is built to care. It happens. It happens to you. Compassion is a reflex that you're flooded with when you see the vulnerability inside the other person. Sometimes we can see that through their crazy behavior, their shitty behavior, when we get good at that. Sometimes we can't. It really helps when the other person is mature enough or inner child aware enough that they can open that up to us. That's why, you know, I have a preference to be with people that can go there with me, although I know that I can't just expect that. Right, so that's what I mean by unpacking. I love unpacking. I also fear it. I resist it. I resist it a lot. I get stuck in self-righteousness like you wouldn't believe. It's like jumping into a cool swimming pool. Oh, no, body doesn't want to go in, and then you jump in and then you say, oh, it's lovely once you're in. It's lovely once you're in. Hey, Tammy, thank you for asking that. And it's so great to see you.
Thank you.
For one moment, for one little moment, we don't have a Pacific Ocean and an entire continent between us.
No.
Right.
Okay, well, thank you everyone for coming. We are hosting another one of Robin's six class course on the inner child journey. It's part of prenatal and perinatal healing online. So I will be sending out the recording to each one of you and more information if you're interested. So that starts on September the 15th. And we've made it very specific to help the audiences in Europe, but so it's at 8 o'clock in the morning Eastern time, 10 p.m. Australian time, and 1 p.m. UK time. So we look, if you want to join us, please email me or Robin, and thank you so very much for coming.
I'll just say very quickly that if you're in a time zone where that will be sometimes way too difficult for you to attend all of the sessions, we record the sessions and they stay on the website for 30 days before they're deleted. So you don't have to attend the sessions. If you want a certificate of attendance at the end, session 5 is compulsory because we're doing a practicum together where we pair up. But I'd love to have more of you guys come along. We're growing like an international community of inner child guides, and so that we can continue to meet like an international tribe and practice this kind of unpacking with one another and just connect really, and broaden the scope of inner baby inclusive. Make that ordinary in our conversations in our lives when needed.
Yeah, so please join us, and thank you for coming tonight. And if you could just turn on your microphone, say goodbye as you head out the door. We like to hear your voice, and we'll see you next time.
That'd be great.
Bye.
Bye,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Thanks for coming.
Good evening.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.